How should you negotiate common contract elements in your managed services agreement? That's the topic of today's conversation on the MSP Zone.
You're entering the MSP Zone, a podcast for the managed services community, covering news, analysis, and interviews from around the globe. Elevate your MSP game by staying in the MSP Zone. And now, your host, Charles Weaver.
Hey, everybody. Hope you are all doing fantastic. It is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And all this month at MSP Alliance, we are promoting and talking about issues that are important for cybersecurity hygiene. And although today we're talking a little bit about, not a little, we're talking a lot about legal topics, it does certainly involve cybersecurity awareness and hygiene. We're going to get to that at the end of today's podcast. But leading into it, and you'll see how it matches up. We're starting off a series today that is going to talk about common MSP contract negotiation issues, and they come up a lot. Now, it may differ MSP to MSP. It may differ on the type of contracts you have. It may differ depending on the type of services you have, the type of customers you have, and their unique requirements and requests. But it always comes up. And our guest today, joining us again from the great state of Texas, Rob Scott, who's going to be walking us through some of the more frequently requested contract negotiation issues and how to resolve them in a favorable way. Rob, how's everything doing down in Texas today?
This is prime time in Texas. October is the best month in North Texas. The weather is perfect. The sun is shining, and people are working and jamming up the highways because there's lots of traffic, but everything is going well here in Texas.
Good to hear. And I heard not too long ago you had a birthday, so happy birthday to you.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate that.
So Rob, I know we have some very exciting news at the end of the program today, but just jumping right into our series, the first, it seems a little bit odd to talk about term and termination, but those are common things that come up in the sales cycle, right? Of a managed services agreement and relationship. It's very common to talk about, how do we end the relationship? I mean, before we get into the specifics, do you have any thoughts about that as a concept?
Yeah, I think term is important because monthly recurring revenue, multiple year contracts is part of the attractiveness and the basis for the tremendous growth in managed services. So we recommend to our clients to offer a base of a 3-year managed services contract and offer 1 year and month-to-month contracts at a premium of 20 and 25% increase respectively. And so the term is wildly important because that specifies how long the customer is going to be committed to the terms of the service. And as many people know, in managed services, frequently there are many months to break even. And so if you have a customer that can cancel for convenience without any liquidated damages provision, you're putting yourself in a situation where you might not make any money.
So it is important to, and I don't know if it's regardless of whether or not you do month to month, whether you do 1 year or you do multi-year, you do want to have some language in your agreements, with your customers that talks about how long the term of the agreement is and like renewal. So your first advice is you have options as an MSP, month to month or multi-year. Think about it, think how it factors into your business model, and then make sure it's reflected in the agreement, first and foremost.
That's correct.
Okay. When I hear a lot about, my first question to you is, evergreen clauses, right? You and I know what that means. The rest of the rest of the world may not be familiar with that as a legal contract concept, but I hear a lot of MSPs rely on the fact that they have evergreen clauses in their managed services agreements. What are they for people that don't know, and should you use them?
Evergreen is a term a term that doesn't have a set expiration date. It's good until canceled. The agreement stays in place until one of the parties provides written notice of cancellation.
And is it whether or not it's common? Do you like that, or would you rather have a set term that forces a renewal discussion?
It depends on the agreement. We set up our master terms to be evergreen, but we set up our service attachment terms to be defined term. Typically 3 years is what's recommended, but it could also be 1 year or month to month. But the idea is that we only use evergreen contracts for the master terms, and then all of the other services have a specified term and a clear effective or commencement date. And then you mentioned renewals. There's a number of ways to handle it. There's the auto renew that it just renews automatically. And then there's the non-auto renew, which is, it expires at the term. You could also auto renew to month, or you can auto renew for an additional year. And I prefer the auto renew for an additional year as opposed to converting from a fixed term to a number of months. Month to month, I don't care for month to month in managed services at all.
But these are business decisions that, regardless of what that decision is, can and ought to be codified, meaning written into the agreement, correct?
Yeah, look, the term of the contract is one of the essential terms of a contract. How long is it? What is the term? The only thing that I could think of is more fundamental to a contract than the term is the price. So the answer is yes, it must be clearly documented in the agreement.
And look, I know we're straddling the fence of legal and sales tactics, but they're not always easy to separate for obvious reasons. So I do want to bring these topics up, but know that we have talked about and probably will in the future talk about sales tactics that involve things like term of the agreement. So regardless of you're on monthly, you're on yearly, renewal evergreen clauses are fine. Know how they impact, I'm assuming, your sales cycle, and just make sure that it accurately reflects what your sales and marketing people are actually saying, I imagine is very important.
That's correct. And then once the term is established, if it's anything other than month to month, then you get into the circumstances under which the client can cancel for convenience, and whether or not there will be a fee, an early termination fee, and how it will be calculated. Because in the end, those provisions are what give teeth to the customer's commitment to a long-term contract.
That's a great segue into termination. And there are a couple of common termination models out there. Rob, I'm thinking specifically of convenience and for cause. Could you give us a brief description for those people not familiar with this? What is the
termination for cause is something that is included in almost every managed services contract, which says if there is a failure of the service, and that needs to be defined. But if one of the grounds that's listed for cause, they stop doing business, they become insolvent, the persistent failures of SLAs that are unremediated, then the customer gives notice of cancellation, and the cancellation can happen with no termination fee if it's for cause. In other words, the fault of the provider.
Right.
Termination for convenience is a separate concept that says maybe the customer got a cheaper price from another vendor, or maybe the customer decided to hire a resource internally, or maybe the customer has a personality conflict with one of the providers, but it doesn't rise to the level of cause under the contract. Well, they can then terminate on the notice period that's specified in the agreement, typically 60 days, and pay an early termination fee, which is equal to some percentage of the fees that would be collected to the end of the term if there was no cancellation. And we recommend 50%.
So it's better to so structuring these things, regardless of the term, having a convenience and for cause termination, and assigning dollar values for each of those is really important, based on what I'm hearing.
Very important. What is the effect of termination is what we're talking about now. Effect of termination depends on the reason for the termination. If the termination is for cause, then the customer pays everything that it owes, through the time of the termination, and doesn't have to pay an early termination fee. If the termination is for convenience, a lower price, a change in strategy, a downsizing, a sale of the business, whatever, then the early termination fee should be set forth in the effective termination section of the agreement. And as I said, we recommend using 50%. Some people say 75%. I've seen some that say 100%. And we recommend, for enforceability reasons, that our clients don't exceed 50%.
Okay. So if you are out there taking notes saying, all right, I gotta go talk to our lawyer and make these changes, I think you have options, right? That's the number one thing. You have options. Just make sure they're well drafted in your agreement. I think, Rob, having these fees for cause or convenience termination are useful because it gives, like you said, teeth to the agreement and to the relationship, so that it's not just you can get out of it and only the MSP is going to be harmed, right? You, the customer, will never be harmed. I think that that's unfair. We've long thought in the industry that that's unfair, but I want to go back to this idea of the term length, because that seems to get hung up in a lot of MSPs when they talk about term of the contract with valuation of their company. And I don't want to introduce valuation necessarily here, but I think it's worth a footnote. I think, and tell me what you think of this, that there's been a shift in the age-old theory that the longer the contract term of the MSP agreement, the more valuable it is, and hence the more value inherited by the MSP. And I think that has gone away to the longer the relationship with the customer, that is more impactful on the value of the MSP business. And it's not necessarily whether you have a 5-year agreement or you have a month-to-month. What are your thoughts on that theory?
I think you want both. I think you want the best long-term contract you can have and a history of customer retention. Because even, and again, I'm saying take the business that has good retention, right? Should they have longer term contract? Would they be better off with longer term contracts versus shorter term contracts, assuming there's pricing flexibility? The answer is yes. A longer term contract with no pricing flexibility could be a liability, not an asset.
Definitely. I could see that. Yeah.
But I don't want to leave the impression that for valuation purposes, the existence of long-term contracts with pricing flexibility will not add value to a business that already has good retention.
Okay.
As you find that client, right, that prospective client, they're either going to have good retention or they're not. I think everybody's going to benefit in a valuation perspective from having good long-term contracts with customers. If in reality their customers are trying to get out and most of their customers are in disputes with them over why they had to cancel, then that business isn't worth very much.
So you should have both termination for cause and convenience. And how would you structure it? And what are the limitations of what are the common pushbacks that a MSP would typically, like, what do you see, without naming names, obviously, what do you typically see in termination negotiations?
Well, a couple things. One is sometimes end users negotiate to expand the definition of cause all the way to satisfaction.
So it's indistinguishable whether it's for cause or for convenience.
It grounds for causes. I'm not happy. Customer is unhappy, and so that, I would say, if you get a customer going that far with what they want to call cause, that's too far. The other thing that we see is, customers want to be able to cancel for convenience without any early termination fee. To which I say, that's month to month. That's not a contract for a term. If you can cancel a contract for convenience with no penalty, then the term that's in the agreement is irrelevant. That's just a month-to-month contract. And we could offer you that, but not at this price.
Is there ever a reason why you would consolidate the cause and convenience termination language? Like in that scenario you just gave where the customer's really pushing back. Is there a reason why you would collapse the two into one and just negotiate only on the amount to be paid?
You can, but a customer is not likely to want to have to pay anything to get out for cause.
So that's really why they're negotiating. They're negotiating not for the definition of cause or convenience. They're negotiating for the lowest rate penalty for termination possible. Did I say that right?
Part of it, they want to be, first and foremost, they want to be able to get out if the service is bad, like objectively bad. Like,
right.
So, and that's reasonable. They shouldn't have to pay to exit if the service is below, what the, what would be, the business is insolvent. It's being, in bankruptcy for for creditors, and there's no service, and when you call the help desk, nobody answers. Those types of things. The customer's not going to want to pay anything. So you really, it's kind of a non-starter to tell a customer you got to pay to get out, even if it's for cause. So then the discussion is, okay, what is it? If it's for convenience, then what would we pay?
So, in your opinion, having the two termination clauses set in your template, having it, kind of standardized, is it something that you do encourage negotiation? Is it just a fact of life, or is it something? And I'm assuming these termination clauses, are they in the master service agreement or in the service agreement?
Both.
They're both.
Yeah. So the way we set up the master is evergreen, and the customer could terminate it at any time, but a termination of the master doesn't come into effect until the end of any service period for any then active service attachment. So there's term and termination language both in the master and in the service agreements as well.
Got it. And would you say that this is one of the more commonly contested areas of a managed services agreement? Is this termination section and the related clauses that associate it?
I would say that the right to terminate, the effect of termination, and whether there's a termination fee and what it is are fairly heavily negotiated. I mean, these are key components to a managed services agreement. Typically, when you're talking about a long-term contract, your customer's going to want to know what if I need to get out.
Yeah, I get it. Knowing the fast-paced nature of some sales processes, it's not likely that they're going to want to have like Scott and Scott present in every single sales process, helping out with negotiations. But at some point, there's got to be some latitude that the salespeople, that the company has, the MSP company that is, in making changes to the agreement. Number one, is that true? And then number two, and then what's the trigger for, whoa, that request is now for termination. That's now a legal matter. And what guidance can you give to the MSPs on that?
So the business issues are, what is the term? What is the effect of termination in terms of, a percentage of the fees? I mentioned I recommend 50. Some people may choose 75. Some people may use 100. So those are business issues. What percentage of the unearned revenue will be there? And I think the client, that's a business issue. Clients can negotiate on that if they want to. Where you get into legal grounds is like when people want to start adding things to the definition of grounds, or when they want to not pay an early termination fee for canceling for convenience. Those would be significant legal changes that should be reviewed by counsel before agreeing to them.
So just to tidy things up, if you are an MSP and and this is assuming that you have that structure of, you have a master service agreement with your general terms and conditions that is evergreen, as Rob said, and then you have a service agreement or service attachment that has the more precise, specific to each project or customer that you have, different terms. You should have a pretty good idea of what your salespeople are authorized to negotiate, what those boundaries are, and then make sure that that is always updated into the agreement. And obviously, before someone with authority signs it, you guys read those changes very carefully. Rob, I'm assuming that's a fairly common practice in the MSPs that you work with.
That's correct. Very common.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I mean, look, I hope you guys got something out of it, which is term and termination, renewal. All of those are. It's a simple and it's a fairly small, section of most agreements, but it's really important. I mean, if you listen to what Rob said, it can really impact pricing. It can impact termination fees. It can impact how what your sales closure rates are. There's a lot at stake, a lot riding on that one thing related to term. And Rob, your standard, I mean, you don't have a standard, do you? I mean, do you modify your termination clauses for your, MSPs that come to you based on a set of questions you ask them, or do you just recommend one standard way?
No, we talked it through with the clients. I mean, and not dissimilar to the way we've discussed the issues today. And if you hire us to draft contracts for you, you're probably going to see 50% as the early termination fee. And that's in addition to that, any out of pockets that you have to incur, it would be on top of that. But so no, we talk it through. This is all, like you said, there's a mix of business, sales and legal here. And my goal is to give the clients the opportunity to understand what the business issues are and how they relate to the legal points. The one thing I do want to mention, Charlie, is in light of changes in the labor market recently, renewal pricing and the ability to escalate prices during the term of an agreement are critically important as well. So it's the term, the termination, and the renewal, but also renewal pricing is a huge topic now because of wage inflation, difficulties with the labor markets, and what we've seen just in terms of inflation in the delivery of the services, the costs associated with delivering services. Those renewal pricing and the ability to escalate pricing on an annual basis are critically important as well.
Yeah, I mean that I hadn't thought about that, but that's super critical. That you want as an MSP to be able to have that flexibility without you yourself being hedged in such a way that you are confined and therefore maybe losing margin or worst case losing money because you couldn't price it accordingly.
Yeah, and in the past we've seen price escalation provisions that are tied to cost of living increases, and more recently we're using much higher percentages than we've seen in the past. What I've seen is 3 to 8% being typical, and many of our clients that we've been working with more recently are choosing to pick the higher end of the range. Many at up to 10%. The right to increase contract prices up to 10% per year, which in this market makes sense to me, but in previous markets would have been perceived as being very high.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, there you have it. If you have questions, obviously, reach out to Rob. He and his team do amazing work, represent a lot of MSP Alliance members. And, he's been a fixture in the MSP world and the MSP Alliance community for so long. I mean, 20 years, coming up on 20 years. Jeez, could we be that old, Rob? 20 years.
My friend said, I don't feel old, but I've seen the pictures.
I like that. So now it's time to make good on that tease we did at the beginning of the episode, where we're going to talk about some very exciting changes that we have coming up. As a lot of you know, this summer, we had some pretty noteworthy, high-profile ransomware cases that hit the MSP community, meaning the MSPs and their vendors. And the MSP Alliance is working very hard to address the things that we can control and things that we think can make the MSP community better. And that also includes making managed services better to those who consume it. And one of those areas obviously impacts legal contracts. And, we've been talking a lot. Rob and his firm at Scott & Scott have been doing, as I mentioned, a lot of work with MSPs all over on helping them get good contracts reviewed, updated, and for those that didn't have them at all, creating them out of whole cloth. That's not going to change. And Rob, I don't want to maybe say that. You could probably do a little bit better job of just talking about kind of the first step of what we're going to be announcing here today with this new document. You want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, after, maybe 12 to 13 years of prodding by Charles, Scott & Scott and the MSP Alliance have entered into an exciting program that will make the Scott & Scott MSP contract templates available for licensing from the members without the need to specifically engage Scott & Scott for any legal services. Of course, we'll still be there and available for anybody who has questions and needs legal services, but these documents could be licensed by people who have their own lawyers that they want to review them, or maybe have in-house attorneys or a relationship with another attorney and don't necessarily want to hire Scott & Scott, but want to benefit from all of our experience and what we've included in our documents. And these documents are going to be mapped to the verification program. So anybody who's interested in going through the verification program can rest assured that the MSP Alliance contract stack will meet the needs of the verification program from a contractual perspective. And the first document that we're making available in the library is a response to the ransomware situation that Charles alluded to. And it is a schedule of third-party service providers. This is a template to be used as an attachment to an MSP's either managed services contract or master services agreement. It could be set up as an addendum to existing contracts. And what this document does is it specifically lists all of the third-party service providers that the MSP is going to give access of data or involved in delivering the services. It discloses the terms and conditions that will be applicable to that vendor's tools. And it shows the privacy policy from that vendor. And it specifically in bold-faced lettering and in a clear way, in an unequivocal way, has the customer agree to hold the MSP harmless for any failures of third-party service providers. And this is, I think, an important component to have. If you think about the facts of the Kaseya case, that MSP probably didn't have an adequate waiver from the customer to really protect itself from a claim caused, potentially by Kaseya, but for which the customer was harmed. And this schedule of third-party services will be made available for download through the MSP Alliance. And we're offering it at a very special introductory price of $99. And for that $99, you'll receive a editable Word document that you could take and adapt and update, work with your attorney to get it incorporated into your customer agreements. And we think that those that do so will be in a much better position from a perspective of mitigating liability associated with failures of third-party solutions, such as what appears to have happened in the Kaseya incident.
So, I don't know if all of you guys realize what just happened, but if you are worried about how to communicate third-party risk that you as an MSP and your customers inherit, then this document is what you need. And implementing this document in your other agreements, as Rob just said, is so critical. And that's one of many. This isn't the only thing we're going to do, but this is a very important step of trying to equalize the risk that is out there due to cyber attacks. And we want to make sure that everybody's safe. MSPs, customers, and vendors alike. And so if you are interested in obtaining this template, it's very nice. I've seen it. It's so simple to use and so simple to update, and very elegant in its approach of describing kind of who you use and making sure that those customers, as Rob said, understand that that's additional separate risk from what you as an MSP are doing, because it's obviously not in your control. Send us an email at mspzone@mspalliance.com. Let us know that you're interested in that template. We will send you instructions on how to obtain it. And then if you want to have your legal counsel take a look at it, it's pretty simple. But if you want to have the folks at Scott & Scott, they're obviously the ones that created it. They understand this stuff backwards and forwards. You could always reach out to them, and there'll be instructions on how to do that as well. Rob, this is so exciting. I know we've talked about it for years. It's finally happening, and I'm excited about not just today, but all the things that we have coming, that haven't been announced yet. That's exciting stuff for me.
Well, absolutely. And I think just for everybody who's interested and wants to keep an eye on the progress here, this template is going to be made available now. And by the end of the year, we expect to have the core managed services contracting platform available to be a license from the MSP Alliance. And so we're working hard to get all those libraries together and working with the MSP Alliance on how we're going to efficiently deliver those. And so it's going to be very exciting. We're going to have the most comprehensive set of managed services customer contracts available, and they're going to be mapped very specifically to the MSP Verify program, which will be unique in the marketplace, and in that where you'll have customer contracts that are very closely tailored to the verification program. And I think that it's a unique offering, and I'm very excited to be doing it with the MSP Alliance.
Well, there you have it, folks. I hope you took this episode seriously. I hope it was helpful for you. If you have questions for us, again, mspzone@mspalliance.com. If you want to reach out to Rob directly, he's always available and loves to get your emails and schedule time. But we love to hear your feedback. But take some of these things to heart, use them in your practice. It can make a very big difference about how you price, how you market, how you sell and close deals. And the obvious thing is we want you to be closing more business, but doing it in a safe way and something that protects your MSP business, not lends it to further risk. That's all we have today. Rob, thank you very much for joining us on the program again.
Charles, always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
And that's it. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a like. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast so you will get notified when future episodes are released. We will see you next time in the MSP Zone.